I saw Bigfoot carrying a body. The hunter's true story from Oregon. If one day you smell wet fur mixed with rotting meat in the woods, turn back. I didn't. It was November deep in the Oregon mountains. Frost clung to the barrel of my rifle. I sat in a tower 30 feet high, watching a forest so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. The wind moved through the pines, and the fog stretched into silver threads. Through my scope, I saw it step out walking on 2 legs tall enough to brush the sky shoulders like slabs of wood arms hanging almost to its knees. It didn't hurry, but every step sank deep into the ground. What froze my blood wasn't the size. It was what rested on its shoulder, a man, a red jacket, head slumped against the creature's back arms and legs dangling like a porcelain doll. I'd seen dead weight before. I knew it when I saw it. The thing carried him the way a hunter carries a fallen deer, steady, unbothered almost. Practiced. It moved toward the limestone ridge. Along the path, the berry bushes were crushed tree bark torn open and bleeding sap. Then the rocks split apart, revealing a dark gap like the mouth of a cave breathing in the cold. A stench rose up, musk, rust, and forgotten flesh. And then I heard its breathing, low, ragged, drawn out like wind scraping through a broken pipe. Every ounce of reason screamed, "Stay in the tower, call for help, wait for sunlight." But that red jacket, it might still be warm. My grip on the rifle burned into my skin. I placed a boot on the first rung. If I was right, there was a life to save. If I was wrong, this forest would swallow me before the sun ever reached the bottom of that ravine. I climbed down and followed. Before we go any further, comment the name of your city below. When the story ends, rate it from 0 to 10. To part 1. The decision to leave the tower. If there's even 1% chance the man in the red jacket is still alive, I have to go. I slid from the tower like a thief leaving a rooftop, my hands clutching the frozen rungs. The ground greeted me with a layer of crisp frost beneath my boots. My breath turned to smoke, chest tight from the cold and from what I was about to do. I checked the magazine, zipped my coat up to the chin, and rested my finger along the trigger like making a small, quiet promise. Go until you know for sure. I hugged the ridgeline, moving through the shadows of the trees. Each step was a trap, slow, steady, careful not to snap a single twig. The morning woods are usually alive with sound, but today, the forest held its breath. Every few dozen paces I stopped to listen, then kept going, keeping the wind in my face so I wouldn't lose the trail. I didn't call anyone. I knew these woods better than anyone in town, and I knew if I waited even a minute, everything would vanish into rock and shadow. My grip on the rifle creaked in the silence as I stared toward the faint outline of the limestone ridge, the same path it had walked without hesitation. I descended into the wind hollow. From here on, turning back would mean leaving that red jacket to the dark. I didn't turn back. Part 2. The Tracks and the Smell. The first sign appeared sooner than I expected, a pine trunk clawed raw at chest height, but the gouges reached far above my head, too high to make sense. Sap was still bleeding. Beside it, a young tree had been snapped like straw. I placed my hand on it, the wood still warm from the force that broke it. In a patch of mud fed by a trickling stream, I saw it a footprint longer than 2 handspans, heel wide, 5 toes spread clear, each tipped with faint claw marks. I set my size 11 boot next to it. It looked like a child's shoe beside a shovel. The mud was packed, deep edges pushed high, whatever left it was heavy as stone. I looked up. Branches were bent sideways more than 6 feet above the ground. Bramble crushed into a dark trail, leaves clinging to a single tangled strand of black hair. I pinched it between my fingers, coarse, thick, damp, with the musk of wet hide, and slipped it into my pocket as if tucking away a piece of truth no one would ever believe. I lost the trail for a moment where the woods dipped low. The leaves broke off abruptly as if something had begun stepping on stones to hide its prints. I tightened my pant cuffs with a length of cord, pushed through a thorny hazel thicket, cold sweat gathering at my neck, though the air itself was freezing. On a low maple branch hung a thread of cloth dark red, almost missed if I hadn't swept my eyes slow. I caught it between two fingernails. The fabric was rough edges, frayed not by a knife but by a violent pull. Ahead, the ground turned slick and mottled patches of wet earth shining like fish scales. Between them, prints again sunk deep to the water's edge, each stride impossibly far apart. It was moving fast, even while carrying someone. I pressed my pen into the rim of the print. Bubbles rose, mud still soft, still breathing. On a nearby spruce trunk, deep parallel grooves tore through the bark, down to the white wood beneath, far higher than any person I've ever met could reach. The forest began to change its sound. The birds drew away. Silence thickened, heavy, unnatural. I closed my eyes to listen closer. Faintly from somewhere downwind, a breathing slow and steady. Not the pant of something that had run, but the rhythm of something that knew it, didn't need to. Then a new scent touched the back of my tongue, metallic faint, like licking an old copper coin. At the foot of a slope, a patch of berry bushes was pressed flat into shining grooves, and there, within the grooves, the faint outline of a human boot print smaller than mine. The man in the red jacket had walked here before being lifted away. I stared at that trail longer than I should have, then looked up. The black slit between two boulders waited like an eyelid half open. The slope grew steeper, moss slick as oil. I moved in zigzags, pausing with my back against trunks to catch my breath. In the darker soil below, huge tracks continued in a straight line, the spacing so wide that a running man could hardly match it. The rhythm was steady, almost calm, even with a man slung over its shoulder. Then the limestone wall appeared gray and mottled, like the back of a stranded whale. Between two stone masses, a narrow crack opened, veiled by thin saplings like a torn curtain. Grass at the mouth was flattened loose, earth kicked outward in a ring. The smell hit me hard, dense metallic, numbing the tongue. I crouched behind a fallen log, choosing a spot where I could see the cave's mouth without showing my shadow. I mapped my escape in silence, the shallow gully to the left, the old pine stump 7 steps ahead, then a diagonal slide back to the dry creek bed. If it came charging out, I'd count to 3, then vanish. I lay still. The forest had lost all sound. Only a low murmur remained, like someone whispering behind the stone wall. If it stepped out, I'd see it before the next breath. If it didn't, I'd have to go in. Part 3. Into the dark. I held my breath. The gap before me was black as a throat holding a secret. And then it came. It filled the cave mouth, head tilted slightly, as if it could hear the forest through its skin. Broad shoulders, tangled fur, long ears trembling faintly with the wind. It turned toward where I hid. My heart stopped half a beat, then turned away and stepped into the trees, moving impossibly soft for something that size. I counted to 10, then crawled out. The cave exhaled a breath of cold, ancient air. My flashlight swept once, and the floor came alive with bones, deer, elk, and human. Empty sockets stared back at me. The red jacket lay only a few paces from the entrance, a young man's body, trekking boots still caked with mud. I touched his wrist, cold stiff. Nothing left to save. The air inside was old in a way time forgets, the scent of stone, damp skin, and an oily staleness like smoke trapped for years. Bones weren't broken by accident, some twisted, some crushed clean through as if struck by something heavy. Near the wall lay a scuffed plastic box lid cracked open inside a few energy chews and a rain-soaked hiking map. Dark stains spread across the stone nearby, thick and tar-like to the touch, smelling sharp chemical. At the man's side hung a torn pocket pouch. Inside, a smeared ID card, letters half erased. I almost pulled my phone to take a photo, but stopped. My hand was shaking, not from the cold. Deeper in the tunnel, split in two, one branch breathing cold like ice, the other carrying the faint warmth of something alive. On the walls, claw marks repeated in deliberate patterns, the sign of something that didn't just shelter here. It owned this place. Then came the footsteps, heavy, closing fast. I shut off the light and pressed myself between two stones, shoulder-wedged tight lips against cold rock. It entered, stopping right where the red jacket lay. Then slowly it turned its head as if sniffing out something that didn't belong. I felt myself shrinking beside that mass of shadow. Dust tickled my nose. Tears welled from holding still too long. It reached out, broad fingers sliding across the rock, right over the smudge my glove had left. It paused, a low grind of teeth, not rage confirmation. Its eyes caught a hint of light from the cave mouth, a dull green gleam. Its breath rasped, long and hollow like wind through a broken pipe. It crouched beside the red jacket, laid its massive hand on the man's chest, and pressed once as if to check. A deep sound followed, soft, resonant, the sound of something sure of its claim. Then it lifted the body and moved deeper into the dark. I waited until the steps faded into whispers, then slipped free from the crack and crawled toward the mouth of the cave. At the threshold, I nearly stumbled over a small pile of dry branches arranged in an inverted V stuck upright in the stone, a sign I couldn't read. I didn't touch it. I only wanted to get out of that stone throat alive. My heel nudged a loose pebble. It rolled, each tap echoing tenfold through the hollow, and I knew I'd just made the worst mistake of the night. Part 4. The Chase. A roar unlike anything I'd ever heard erupted behind me, loud enough to make the stone walls tremble. I ran for the cave's mouth. The daylight outside hit me like an open sky, and the forest split into streaks of black and green. I didn't run straight. I cut across the slope, pressed against a fallen log, listening, trying to hear which way it would come. It didn't charge blindly like a bear. It looped with the wind flanking, trying to herd me toward a narrow bowl of land between two ridges. A predator that could think. I threw my wool cap to the right, hoping the scent of sweat would trick it. For half a beat, the footsteps swerved, then corrected back toward me. The trick didn't work. The distance closed fast. I raised my rifle and fired. The first round hit center mass, a splash of dark blood, a half-second stumble, then it lunged again. I racked another shot, fired, the bullet tore through its shoulder. The trigger jammed mud from the cave, crusted in the groove, a half-second of death. When it finally released, I could see the hair bristling on its chest. I turned and ran. The slope pitched steeply, branches slapping my face. It didn't slow. If anything, it got faster sometimes, pushing off the ground with its hands like a four-legged beast. Branches cracked, stones tumbled. The space between us shrank as if someone were reeling in an invisible rope. Then the cliff. Below, the river foamed white among rocks the size of trucks. There was no third choice. I told myself, bend the knees, clutch the injured arm, aim for the darker water, and I jumped. The cold hit like a blade. The current spun me, slammed me against stones, then dragged me into one of the few deep pools. I surfaced, gasping, the metallic taste still sharp on my tongue. Above, on the cliff edge, its silhouette stood against the gray sky. A boulder, big as a washing machine, crashed into the water a few feet away, spraying like a cannon blast. The next one struck my shoulder. My right arm went numb. Hung useless. I let the current take me swimming with my left arm and both legs counting each stroke to keep panic from taking hold. The roar faded. Only water tearing at rock remained. The river widened, slowed. I crawled onto the gravel shore, lay there until the purple left my hand and the breath no longer tore my throat. Then the logging road. The main road, the truck. The heat inside the cab saved me for the second time. I sat in wet clothes until my thoughts came back together in a single line. Report it. Now. Part 5. The cave that wasn't there. At the station I told them everything. The red jacket, the bones, the smell, the cave, the tracks. When I got to the part about what had carried the man in red, the officer's face changed. They asked if I'd been drinking. If I'd fallen, hit my head, gotten lost in the cold. I gave them coordinates, rough ones. Described the rock face, the saplings by the entrance, the claw marks on the spruce bark. They nodded, said they'd notify search and rescue. A week later, they told me there was no cave. I asked to go back. They refused, so I went alone. The first time I tied a strip of red fabric to a tree for a marker. The second time the fabric was gone, the bark smooth as if no hand had ever touched it. The third time I stacked a small cairn of stones at the slope's base. The fourth time the cairn was still there, but in the center, a single dry branch was stuck upside down, forming an inverted V. I stared at it until the back of my neck went cold as river water. I adjusted my route, drew my own map, marked every root, every patch of moss. Each time I returned, The ridge looked a little different, the path less familiar. That black mouth seemed like a door that only appeared for those it chose. And sometimes when the north wind changed, the smell of wet fur and forgotten meat would drift to the edge of town like a memory trying to crawl back. In the deepest silence, I can still hear that breathing, low, ragged scraping at the edge of my ear like a reminder. It's still out there. I don't need you to believe me. I just need you to remember this. There are predators that can think in the dark, and there are doors in the mountains that open only when they want to. If one day the forest grows so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat and the wind carries the scent of wet fur and spoiled meat, don't be curious. Leave. Don't look back. Before you leave this video, comment the name of your city below and rate this story from 0 to 10. If you want to hear what comes next, subscribe. Because next time you might not get to learn this lesson the easy way.